We're going to move into our final session for today, and it's a bit of a session where we need to work collaboratively within our groups. So what we're doing is we've had 5 wonderful presentations and 5 wonderful discussions. We're going to spend in our groups, and I'm going to give you and number you off into what you need to contribute in terms of the particular discussion or topic that you as a table will be working on. What we're wanting to work out is a communique for our schools. So we're here as leaders with ACS to work out what are we going to communicate to our schools and to our communities collectively as ACS, as a fellowship in what we are doing within Christian schools, in order that we can communicate to them some of the key takeaways. So we're going to spend about 10 minutes at each table with the small group that we're in, just to be able to articulate some key elements of what we have learnt today with the particular discussion groups. Now, we have got here 10 tables, so it works out fantastically that we have 2 tables per discussion group. So concentrating really, really hard, because I'll lead you from here. Discussion number 1 at the front, discussion number 2, the front here, discussion 3, 4, and 5. Then from here, discussion 1, discussion 2, discussion 3, discussion 4, and discussion 5 at the back there. If we could just spend 10 minutes now as a group just working out what are the key takeaways that we can communicate to our schools, to our staff, to our communities, and then we will bring them back and collate those at the end. So if you haven't spoken into the microphone yet, that is a perfect opportunity to do so in our last walk around. Thank you.
We probably got a little bit sidetracked in that we didn't specifically look at what are the characteristics, but we talked more about the how than the what. And the comment was made at our table, the things we measure, we value. And that really rung true with me. So if you look at it from a governance perspective, that says we value our budget, we value our enrolment numbers, those kind of things. What are we doing that actually shows that we value character and how we build that? So I think one thing moving forward that we'd really like to investigate more is not only how do we teach those characteristics, but how do we measure them? Not just within 13 years of formal education, but how do we measure how those characteristics that we've built in manifest themselves later in life. And the other thing that came out of this morning's discussion that we'd like to take further is that idea of deliberate and intentional engagement with service. Because I think it's something that we all do to some extent in some capacity. Are we doing it intentionally, systematically, and really looking at the why of how we're doing that? Thanks, Nita.
Yeah, we did the same. We didn't actually talk about particular character traits, but we did talk about that it starts at the board level. The board actually keeping us accountable, working together with the leadership so that we're on the same page. The other one that we spoke about was, what does the word character in each particular school mean? We spoke about the fact that meanings and those kinds of things have changed so dramatically, and people change what that actually means and looks like. So being very intentional about what does the word character actually mean in each particular school. That outflowing going from board to leadership, and it has to start with our staff. You would all agree, staff have to have this on board before it goes out to the students. And students will also, almost pick it up by osmosis if the staff have got it right. And the one that really stood out for me is the invigorating, really getting it invigorated again and starting off. We all know it's important, but do we actually do it as intentionally as we should? So I'm encouraged to take it back to my staff to invigorate our virtues that we have got at our school.
Fantastic, thank you. As group number 2 makes their way up, I'll just remind people what that discussion was. How can we articulate a distinctive vision for Christian education to our post-Christian society. So if you're the speaker for your table, please come on up.
Thank you. I think the biggest challenge is actually making it concise. And we talked about, following on from this morning, we talked about being missional, that our schools need to be missional, that we're not to bunker down and build trenches and in the climate that we're in, culture wars, identity politics, that we as Christians need to be distinctive about what our mission is and be open and be inclusive, which is different to tolerant. The gospel is inclusive, and we need to reflect that in how we live out all that we do in our schools, that we are people of hope and organizations of hope that point to a future. And in a moral, we're living society is morally heading towards poverty, moral poverty. We're living in a very difficult age, and for us to articulate that there is a purpose to life, that's really important. What is our purpose? That there is a purpose, and there is an objective purpose, and there is solid ground that we can stand on as Christians. Those are all distinctives that we talked about. We also, I'm struggling with the language a little bit here. We need to come up with a language that society will understand in terms of what we're on about. That's really important, a common language that everyone can understand.
Yeah, so to follow on from that, I'll just pick up on your last point, because two of ours were very similar. One was about how important our languaging is if we're having that distinctive Christian education, making sure that we're thinking about how we are communicating internally within our schools, but also externally, so that it is distinctive, it's understandable to people outside our schools, but it's also distinct, and it's not just the common secular wording that everybody else understands. So language, as we said, was really actually critical. We've got to spend a lot of time thinking about how we are actually describing things. Two is the distinctives, identifying those distinctives, looking at strategic ways of outworking those, making sure that we identify that we can actually give meaning to life. People do need to have that meaning, that have that identity, allowing our students and our schools to become safe places to ask those really tough questions that they're going to be hit with when they leave the school in our increasingly secular society. Simon talked about that shift in belief, that shift even, why would you even believe in a God? Why is that even important? Giving our students a safe place to do that, that makes it a very distinctive Christian environment. But the last one for us goes back to the original questions that Simon mentioned right up at the beginning of his talk, about those questions about the religious freedom. Why should we have religious freedom? Why should we be allowed to employ the staff that we do? Why should we get sort of government funding? Those really tough questions that are going to come at us, and those challenges are going to come at us. I think from discussion too, we took away that those conversations need to be there. We need to be on the front foot. We've got to be having strategic discussions now on how we're actually going to address those and how we're going to look at those things moving forward. So being on the front foot of that, from a board level right down to our staff, it's got to become something that we are actually not just hoping someone else comes up with it, but really drilling down now ourselves.
Okay, moving on to our third discussion. It was, what mental health issues have we observed in our students, and how does the Bible speak to those issues? If you are the speaker for your table, would you like to come on up?
Just to summarize all the things that we said, our relationships, as we know, are the foundation. We actually need to know our children as individuals so that we're effective in the triage and the treatment process. We want de-escalating language taught to our students, our staff, and our parents. and we want to reintroduce kingdom vocabulary instead. We want to be clear on what is our parents' responsibility and what is our school's responsibility. And then we want to get support, appropriate, effective support from external places as needed, because as schools, we cannot provide all that is required. And when we get the right people to support our families, we need to make sure they're speaking into our children and our families' lives from a Christian worldview perspective. Yes, the world has some truth, but only when we bring Christian worldview thinking to it is the whole story told. Thank you.
Quite simply, have faith in the plan that God has for you and your school. I can't put it any more simply than that. I could spend hours, days, weeks talking about the mental health and how you can embed different programs, go about different frameworks for your school, but at the end of the day, it's your faith that will keep you strong. It's your faith that our students and our families need. I would ask you to go back and review the processes that you currently have in place. We were asked to talk about, how would we have the conversation about mental health at our schools. It's something Corinity schools do day in, day out, so it's nothing new for us. Perhaps for yourselves, it's about, alerting staff to what is in your school, your families to what is in the community, and just about being that support for them. As I said earlier, there are so many people within the ACS family that, focus on this type of thing. So please seek out those people and grab that knowledge off them.
As our next two speakers, summarisers come on up for discussion number 4. If you make your way up, that'd be great. The topic was, if we could free up further resources, where would we direct them in order to improve the common good?
Thanks. Just by way of a very brief summary, I think we came to the conclusion that our greatest resource are our people, both staff and the students. And I think that's a biblical sort of model, isn't it? I mean, God sends his greatest gift in the form of a person, and our greatest resource, I feel uncomfortable about thinking of our students as a resource, but in the long term, our students are going out into our communities in order to be givers, we would hope. So we can think of them like that, and we want to, I guess, within the liberty, we have a fair degree of liberty in how we go about that within a school context. So building up a disposition to be generous and outward focused in our schools so that we can mimic that divine pattern in being givers. And we talked about some specifics in that. The capacity of larger schools to be giving of time and relationship and intellectual resources to smaller schools, but also identifying in terms of the common good within our community, those places where we can engage in relationships. So one very specific example of this is just the awareness that there's a lot of incredibly lonely older folk out there, and there's an enormous disconnect between our young folk and our old folk. Having community service where we try to bring those two elements together in order to build up our young people and our staff to have that outward-looking focus of being generous in time and relationship and servicing a common good there.
One thing I'd like to start our little section off with is that we serve a God who's a God of abundance. And when we start talking about resources and sharing resources, it really comes back down to a matter of generosity. God is generous and he expects us to be generous. And if we're all part of the same body, and it's a little bit like when you consider the members of a body, some of us are better at some things than other things, but if we're willing to share and help each other, we can actually achieve that common purpose, which has been the theme of what we've been talking about today. So one of the things that, or some of the things that came out, we very much agree with the other table who shared their thoughts, is that collaboration between schools and actually being able to share resources with those school bodies that maybe are more limited, be it because of regional or size or something like that. And so our kind of statement for the day is facilitate the sharing of ideas and provide a centralised resource that ACS school communities can access to enable and grow educational outcomes.
Fantastic. Our final discussion as people come up to share was how can we support our leadership teams and each other to promote and encourage work wellness?
Awesome. Wonderful, thank you. Okay, we thought that the important thing to share was to talk about or changing the narrative around improving outcomes and efficiency or effectiveness in a school means we actually have to take seriously and address the culture of taking our emotional well-being into account and paying attention to our physical needs. To be done three ways. Firstly, to actually equip, so in the personal leadership side of things, to equip our staff to take seriously their own personal leadership in areas of rest and areas of actually unplugging and paying attention to the consistency of taking time out. Secondly, corporately, and the culture of developing and encouraging spaces for gratefulness and thankfulness in every setting, from staff through to classrooms. Also really focusing on intentional leadership, on how do we establish safe and engaging classrooms environments, both again in the classroom and in the staff room. And finally, the third aspect was that it actually requires the senior leaders to model the importance of actually looking after ourselves and our physical bodies.
I'm probably just going to repeat a lot of what you said, but it was so critical, I think, at our table. So to summarise, Dr. Budgeon, we have written, as leaders and teaching professionals, the requirement of rest is critical to our personal health and career sustainability. Research says that we need planned intentional minimum 3 weeks per year, 2 to 3 planned long weekends per year, and regular micro breaks during the day. To do this effectively, we need to unplug. And the second thing is also around gratitude, and we've written here, we should be intentional in building a culture of gratitude within our school communities. The health of our people and organisation is reliant on this sense of being eager and interested, not fear and shame.
Fantastic. Well, there's lots to think about. And one of the things that I personally have been really encouraged about by listening and hearing all the discussions throughout what has been a very a big day and a very significant day. And I know that my head's very full with lots of things. I'm very much encouraged that at the core of what we do, it's very evident that we are very student-focused and child-centred organisations. Within that, we also recognise the importance that our staff play and how we have to invest in them. Taking it a layer back, the importance of Christian education, knowing that this is a kingdom ministry and this is something that we are doing for Jesus. I'm just so encouraged to hear all of those things happening today and very evident within what we have been discussing today. In thinking about our pillars here, certainly very, very noticeable that when we think about what we've been discussing, there's elements of today as we've shared and collectively shared, you can see how much these pillars have been very evident throughout the discussion and throughout the day, which as a body of schools, as part of ACS, is so important to be able to come together and to be able to share. We're going to wrap up today very, very shortly. Just a reminder for those of you who are staying tonight and are attending the dinner, that starts at 5:30 for drinks in this room, with dinner coming along at around 6 o'clock is when we are going to start that dinner and hearing some of those different things. So thank you so much for your contribution today. it has been a very, very thought-provoking, but very practical day as well. And so hopefully some of those key takeaways will be able to contextualise in our own schools, in our own communities moving forward. So thank you very much, everyone. And we will be coming back at 5:30 this evening.
Go away. Thank you, Paul. I know he was a bit nervous when I asked him on the spot a few weeks ago to MC, but hasn't he done an amazing job? And this is, if you didn't know, Paul Thompson from Bundaberg Christian College. Now you do. Yay. Thank you. And I just want to acknowledge we've had 6 board chairs in the room today, all day. So I think that is phenomenal. If the board chairs feel like putting their hands up. So thank you. That is awesome. There has been such rich conversations today, and as we did last year, what will come out of this is a communique with some action points that we will circulate. Your head's probably spinning, and that's the purpose of the communique. Just a reminder, Chris Mountford, the new Executive Director of ISQ, is our guest speaker tonight, and we have some fellowships to award as well. So look forward to seeing you in just over an hour, over an hour and a bit. So thank you again for today, and enjoy the rest of your birthday, Jason. Thanks, everybody.